our work on the FY 2023 budget, and we've started with some testimony on the legislative budget. And now we've got Dan Dickerson from Joint Fiscal, who is going to give us a run through of the other sections of the budget. We've heard before you came in the Sergeant at Arms budgetary request, which is, let me ask, that is to be considered in addition to what's in the governor's proposed, if I understand it correctly.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Dan, it's all yours.
Well, thank you all for having me. Dan Dickerson from the Joint Fiscal Office, and I'll be walking you through the legislative branch budget request for fiscal year 2023. And then just so it's fresh in your mind, that's 5 total appropriations across the branch. The first for the legislature itself, which includes the House of Representatives, the Senate, the House Clerk, the Senate Secretary, our Human Resources Office, and our Office of Legislative Operations. The next appropriation is Legislative Council, and it's Legislative Information Technology, Joint Fiscal Office, and your Sergeant at Arms. So 5 total appropriations. As I first begin to go through this, I'm going to speak to it as one unified entity, and then I'll sort of go into the details for each office. So in fiscal 23, we're asking for an appropriation of $19,158,459 across the branch. This is about 1.7 above adjusted fiscal 22 appropriations, and I'll go into why I say adjusted shortly. But that's a growth rate of 9.6%, which is steep. But I've attempted to break it into 2 pieces. The first, which is the 8%, is basically we had a very significant pay act that came through, and for exempts and for legislators now, we get the COLA that comes with the pay act, and we get the steps together. And so when those combined are significant, which they were, that creates pretty significant costs across the branch. And previously, legislators only received the COLA. They're now receiving the step, which I think is a step in the right direction. Sorry for my terrible pun. And then the other part of that 8% is we took over the 2-acre and 4-acre space. We've also taken over space in 133 state and 109 state. So we'll now be paying the fee for space for those spaces in fiscal 23. So 9% and 9.6% growth. Almost all of that is in this realm. Oh, and I forgot to say, in addition to the pay acts, health premiums are going up. And then the retirement, the state share of retirement has gone up. So all of that is a part of this 8%. And then the remaining 1.6 is sort of a lot of different things. And I'll go into that.
Let me, if I could just clarify, Dan, that FY22 appropriation, that's your footnote, include the BAA. So what you're having is 9.6 over the BAA?
Yes. Yes.
That's what I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, and
that correctly.
Just a reminder on BAA, 2 offices got adjustments to their base budgets in fiscal 22. First is the legislature. There was a staff person authorized within Human Resources in fiscal year 22, but was not funded. So we asked for funding in fiscal 22 with the BAA at $105,000, I believe. And then within Joint Fiscal, there were 2 requests. One, that we receive ongoing base funding for the IT project review consultant, and then second for our limited service position that was authorized by Joint Fiscal last fall. And so that's the 295 that gets us to our adjusted FY22 appropriation. So going down in this table on the first page, I went through the pay act and benefits. I went through the internal service, which is almost exclusively fee for space. Within this category of personnel, there are 2 parts to that as well. I think the first is we've had a lot of, I guess, for lack of a better term, churn within the branch as far as people leaving and coming in. the people coming in are opting into higher cost health plans, higher cost, and then they're also opting in a defined benefit, whereas the people that left were defined contribution. So that's been a pressure that we built into FY23. And then the other piece is for the limited service position at JFO, we only asked for 2/3 of the year of funding in our budget adjustments, so the rest we're building in FY23. And the only reason we asked for 2/3 is because the person didn't come on until November of last year. And then this category of all other changes, a part of that is, Kevin could probably explain this better than me, but we recently re-signed our agreement with Microsoft to provide their platform. That cost, IT had anticipated that cost, but it came in significantly higher than they'd expected. So about 50,000 of that was just that change. And then the other 50,000 are things like, printing costs going up. Tom Cavet's contract has a small increase each year, and then a few other small things, but it's a lot of small things that add up. So
the Senate's a deal on page.
I'm sorry?
The Senate's a deal.
Oh.
In terms of.
Oh, you've gotten ahead of me. I see.
Oh, sorry. No,
On the program budget?
yeah.
Okay.
9%.
Well, I will dive right into the program budget for the legislature. So this would be, I should have done this before. This would be page 4 of the packet. I've provided this to sort of give you the breakdown of how the House fits in, the Senate staff, House clerks, secretary, and the operations. This budget, other than the big fee for space change, and then the salary benefits, the Pay Act and the benefits, there's not a whole lot of movement going from FY22-23. One change that's pretty minor, about 15,000, is Mike Frantz committee assistants have increasingly been working more hours during the summer to provide support for the various study committees. So he wanted to make at least one more person available in the summer and have the ability to pay them. And so there's been a little bit of increase in the budget for that. And then additionally, outside of Pay Act, we've built in step increases for committee staff that will be returning year to year. And that's just to give them some predictability because they're not making a whole lot of money. So
I've been looking for the senator's benefit package, and I haven't been able to find that.
well,
It's yet to be funded.
you are now getting the step increases in Pay Act, so that's something, although not, I admit it's not much. But if you decided to go that direction, I would budget for it.
Well, what is our gross weekly salary?
Oh boy, I believe, let's see, last year it was I want to say it's 775 or 795 per week. I don't actually have that.
No, I was just wondering, I was asked that by a reporter, and I don't know what it is. And I don't even know if I get it, it's just.
Yeah.
That's right. It's just, and I'm assuming direct deposits are what they're supposed to be, because I have no way.
Mike knows what it is.
All right,
Mike knows.
what's the answer, Mike?
Your weekly salary is $773.76. It is paid bi-weekly. Yesterday was payday, but yesterday you only got 1 week because during the adjournment for town meeting week, you don't get paid. And then your reimbursement amounts have gone up this year as well.
Okay, 773.
I think I worked harder last week than I have this year.
You're gonna get your reward in heaven. And for those of us who are like Senator Stevens and me, who are now paying for care arrangements, we're probably netting
People keep
below the line.
people keep telling me I'm not gonna be one of those going to heaven. I don't know if I've had that.
Well, get your reward in heaven if you get there. All right, we'll keep going then.
Okay, so moving on to the actual legislature budget sheet, this would be page, I believe, page 5 of your documents. I have line numbers on the left, so I'll try to refer to those line numbers as I just sort of really briefly go through some of the small growth areas. So as you know, you'll see in line 6 and line 10, this is where Pay Act is built in, salaries are increasing from 22 to 23, or at least from what was budgeted in 22 to what we're asking for 23, and same with benefits. For line 12, contract services and consultants, this is where I built in a little bit of money because Arlene has a few initiatives that she wants to, services, I guess, that she wants to start providing on a year-to-year basis. And I'll let her speak to those when she goes later on. And then going down to line 17, these organizational dues, you'll see a big number in FY22 estimated, and that's just because one of those dues didn't get paid in the prior year, so now, and that just the way that.
So it shows a double funding.
Yeah. But that's what we pay to NCSL, we pay to Council of State Governments, what we pay to Uniform Law Commission, and that typically grows a little bit each year. Lines 20 and 21, we expect printing and copying to bounce back as more activity happens in the State House. And those costs have increased in recent years, so I'm anticipating an increase in fiscal 23. And then jumping all the way down, you'll see in each of the budget sheets, I have this category of one-time activities, and this is where we have carry forward from prior years, and then we sort of try to spend it on one-time things as they come up. For the legislature, it's a significant amount of money. The reason being that when you were not here in person, all of those, all that funding that we would have paid for mileage, meals, lodging was not paid, and so we have those savings over a couple of years. So to jump to page 6, you'll see where I've sort of accounted for carry forward and some of the various items that are out there that could be expenditures from that, although that could change. So going into fiscal year 22, we had about 3.3 million of carry forward within just the legislature. We have reverted some of that as per Act 74 and then the BAA. We got some of that back through a reimbursement using the coronavirus relief fund dollars. And then there are just a number of items. Some of the actuarial work that was done in fiscal 21, we paid from that. The ARPA outreach consultant that the Speaker and Pro Tem had hired will come out of this money.
What really helped was the 1.5 we're funding the State House.
Oh, yes, that is still sitting in here, but that, assuming BAA is enacted, will come out.
Well, the House did pass it, right, on Tuesday.
Yes.
Okay, so now it's the governor.
Yes. Let's see, the other big ones, the child care study that that JFO is required to do. We put out an RFP a while back. We've gotten responses. We're sorting through those now, and so we should have some sense of what that cost will be. But right now, I'm carrying the amount that you see in the sheet. And then I've got some money set aside. Basically, we still have some projects happening, mainly within 2ACN, but to some extent within the State House, that it's sort of in a gray area as to whether we can continue using the relief fund dollars. We still have those in our possession, but because it's after December 31st, I just want to make sure that all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed before I use the federal, so that way we can, you know, if the government comes back and says, well, you spent it after the deadline, we can say, well, for these reasons. But just in case, we've got some money set aside for that. And then 2 and 4 Aiken. 2 Aiken, as far as renovations, is essentially done. The 3rd floor is still outstanding. That might be funded in the capital bill, but right now I'm carrying 185,000 for the 3rd floor, and then I have another 500,000 for 4 Aiken, but we don't really have a sense of
But would
what's
it
gonna happen.
pay like that? Why would you run that through a capital bill if you've got the money? If we can pay for it, wouldn't it be a lot cheaper to pay as we go rather than go through the capital bill?
This is going through carry forward, using carry.
Well, right now I'm carrying this carry forward, but yes, that's a good question. It could come out of this money, but on the other hand, this is general funds and we have it sitting here. If you wanted to pull it back and deploy it elsewhere, you could do that, but
Well, why bond for it?
Yeah, why bond?
They're not, they're using carry forward.
Well, I know, but he mentioned they may run it through the capital bill, I thought.
Oh.
Did you mention that?
it might. I think that having the 1.5 for the State House expansion come out of this makes it much more feasible to pay for the 185 out of this. So there's a very good point why borrowing.
That used a lot of the capacity of the carry forward. The House had funded it out of carry forward to 1.5 and we switched it to ARPA. And so this gives Dan a lot more breathing room as it relates to what can be accommodated during the right time.
The other thing I'll say is, this is a fairly long list. Other things could pop up. So yes, understanding that paying cash is always better than bonding. I think having this as sort of a reserve for things that come up for the legislature to spend from, rather than having to ask, fill in an extra appropriation, is also helpful. And so it's a balancing act, but that is a point that.
So Dan, what's our experience with the IT? I know Dan Smith left, and then we've got, has there been a lot of utilization? I'm just wondering in terms of project reviews.
That would actually be a better question for Catherine, because I don't deal directly with our new consultant, or maybe Stephanie would have some sense, but I can't speak to that.
Sorry. The projects, IT project review, have we done much since we hired the new consultant?
Yes, we have, Senator Kitchell. Lisa Govin has been working on, the governor has proposed funding of IT projects in his proposal. There's the Department of Labor, there's DMV, there's several of them. So she has been reviewing them. Some of them are in the very early stages, but she has been involved with discussions especially in the House, as they've been trying to figure out how they want to move forward. So I suspect you will see some of those memos and reviews when you all get into those, if and when you want to get into those.
I know Dan had done a preliminary one on the Department of Labor, and it was still a lot of work. So, okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. So
I will now jump to the Legislative Council budget, which would be the next, unless there are questions on this, and that's a lot of information. So Legislative Council, there's not really much change other than building in the cost of pay act, building into the cost of the benefits changes. One thing I will note, on line 7, where in FY22 we asked for the paralegal, that paralegal was authorized, and that cost hasn't disappeared. It's just filtered its way into the salary benefit category. So that was a question that came up in the House, and I wanted to make sure that I noted it.
that person's been hired then?
Yes, the person has been hired. Let's see.
Is that Gordon?
I don't know Mitchell's name.
Tracy.
Chief Gordon might be the law clerk this session, and they also have a mapping specialist that's doing
Gordon, I've had in my committee, does a good job for you guys. No good.
But is he the paralegal, or is he just a?
No,
Jesse Tracy's the paralegal manager.
Okay.
he's a law student.
BLS clinician, I think is what their official terms are.
So that's the only thing I was going to point out in the operating budget. Like I said, there's not much change other than, there are some internal service charges that have gone up. I guess going down to one-time activity, I just wanted to note in FY22, they are paying for a limited service position that's paralleling the education attorney. And that transition will happen at the end of this fiscal year, and it'll be down to one position going forward. And then they're also paying for the redistricting session person. And we've set aside money. I know this is still up in the air, but in the event that they do, if Ledge Council does move over to 2A again, we've set aside some money to facilitate that, pay for moving furniture that would be needed.
I understand that's a lovely building. I mean, from the outside, the architecture is beautiful. I understand that it's like the guest house or something.
Which building is it?
Not the one right over here that BGS was in.
Oh.
And I understand it's got so many bathrooms. I mean, it's just, and architecturally, it's lovely.
But it's just a bummer. I mean, you guys run back and forth constantly. I mean, it's a lot nicer to have them in the building. I know I deal a lot with Michael O'Grady, and when he's upstairs, you trot up there in 30 seconds, or he could come down, and now you gotta get a coat on and run over there.
Well, the one advantage is that right now they're scattered. Not all of them are here. Some are on the very top floor of the Pink Lady. So it depends on which attorney works with your committee, whether they put the coat on or not.
Yeah, I've seen Stephanie have to go over through a foot of snow back and forth to the Pink House, and, you know, I mean, go.
Well, what are you pushing for? An expansion of the State House?
Well, it should have been done 20 years ago.
Oh, well, you know
What
that.
about a jetway?
Yeah. We need a tunnel.
In
There is a
Connecticut,
tunnel, actually.
they've got an enclosed movable
Oh, nice.
Oh, well,
sidewalk.
I don't think we've got that much money in this budget. So.
Albany Capital has a big tunnel.
Albany Capital is so huge, so, yeah.
So information technology, once again, there's not a whole lot of change other than building in the pay increases, benefit increases. Once again, on line 7, there's this cost for new position that was in 22 that has been sort of.
So how is Kevin doing with his vacancies?
So we hired, for the record, Kevin Moore, Director of IT. We hired our web developer late last year. He's integrating quite well. And we subsequently have a vacancy, unfortunately, in our session-only user support position, which has been hard as we're repopulating the building, frankly. But we're making our way through, and we are really hopeful we find somebody for next session. Because we could use that extra coverage. It's been a challenge for us.
You've done well to keep up with that mess that.
Yeah, look at the technology that we've got here within such a brief period of time.
Is there any chance of getting somebody from Norwich as an
So
intern or something?
we've experienced interns in the past. The experience we had previously was that it was a lot more work than the benefit at that point. But we will continue to work with human resources as internship programs continue to develop and see if we can bring somebody in, maybe get some value out of it.
Yeah.
This is a unique environment for IT staff.
Yeah, I bet it is.
Very
Yeah,
unique
unique environment, period. And look at 180 people think that they're your boss. Huh?
180 people most certainly are my boss.
I think we have to have a conversation about that.
And the only other note that I'll make on the IT budget is down here in this one-time activities category, line 49. We've set aside money and carried forward as an IT project reserve. And I think the question, not so much for 23, but I think going forward is, should some of that filter its way into the operating budget where we just have some money, because IT is such a, you know, it's a realm that's in flux. Have some flexibility there for Kevin to do things that might need to happen on the fly. And so, like I said, that it's not an issue that we've brought forward in 23, but it might be something to consider next year. Moving on to joint fiscal. There's a little bit of change here. You know, we've got the limited service position that we asked for funding for in 22 for part of the year, and then we're asking for the remaining full year funding in 23. So that's line 8. Line 17, as I said, Tom Cavet's contracts has periodic or annual rate increases, so we've increased that budget. And now in line 18, we're carrying the IT project review consultant going forward until you guys decide that you don't want that anymore. But we're carrying it in our operating budget now. Other personal services, we've grown a little bit. This is where we've been able to bring in. This past year, we brought in an individual who sort of helped improve the formatting of our fiscal notes and our issue briefs. So if you've seen any of those, you might have seen that the style has changed a little bit. We've tried to change the tone a little bit to make them more helpful for lay people to understand and digest. And so I think having this funding for other assistance as needed is very helpful. In line 24, hardware and software. So there are two expenditures here. One is ongoing. We pay for the Chainbridge software, and this allows us to model income tax changes, which is very helpful.
That's just been a wonderful resource.
Yes. Going forward, we're also asking for some ongoing funding for SPSS, which if you asked me to spell that out, I wouldn't be able to, but that would allow us, folks working in the ed finance realm, to do some modeling for that. And then the only other increase, I believe, is the major increase. It's line 33. We're asking for a little bit more money since we've increased our staff to allow people to go to trainings or NCSL conferences or learn some of the pictures and get a sense of what other states are doing. And then within our one-time money, we always set aside a little bit of money in case our website needs some sort of change or modification. So that would be the Blue House Group line 41. We always set aside money in case our budget system crashes, because we need that during the session to put out the budget bill. And then we've line 46. Deb Brighton used to live within our operating budget, and she had tried to get away from us, and we've reeled her back in to help train our new employees. So we're paying her a decent amount of money this year and potentially next year as she provides us some backup support. And then
You only got 10 grand, right?
and this is where I want to know if this could increase. In fact, in all likelihood, it will increase. Yeah, that's in our experience, that's been about a month for work over the past.
45 or 35 or 50?
Probably something more like 30 or 40. So thank you for pointing that out. I just hadn't made that change yet. And then we've also contracted with Steve Klein this year to just help in different areas. He's done some work on looking at the capital expenditure cash fund, which I don't know if you've heard about in this committee, but it's a mechanism that the governor has proposed to pay for pay-go essentially.
Yeah, we just heard from the treasurer who was for it too.
But Steve's also done, worked in the climate change realm and some other areas, so he's been really helpful. So that's JFO. And then the Sergeant at Arms, within their operating budget, no major changes. You heard from Janet on the need for some transition assistance, and we've asked House Appropriations for some one-time funding for that. The only other thing I'll point out that isn't in this document is in the category of one-time uses. In the event that the vehicle is authorized, we intend to pay for that from carry forward money, at least for year one. If it's successful, then we'll ask for ongoing funding in FY24. Also within the Sergeant Arms, within the one-time uses category, when there's carry forward, we set aside money for unanticipated security expenses if there are big protests or a lot of big protests that need sheriffs or other support. Then we have a little bit of money set aside to pay for that. And that's another area where, it might be a conversation for next year of whether some of that should migrate into the operating budget to just have it there, so that in the event that carry forward isn't there, we're not sort of scrambling. But other than that, I think that is That's all I have for you today. That's the big picture at least.
Well, I think they brought us almost a full load anyways.
I guess I would open it up. We've heard from Janet, and I don't know whether at this point, Kevin or Arlene have, some additional comments they want to make about their, work or appropriations.
Fully understanding and appreciating, I'm probably standing between you and your weekend at this point.
No, no, we have another bill.
Oh, okay.
No need to feel guilty.
I'm happy to come up and just kind of run through my presentation real quick. It's more, just kind of a review than it is numbers. Dan's covered numbers this year. It's a bit of a different.
And I had it in your pile, right, and Arlene's is white.
Okay.
So it's a refresh of the presentation I provided over the last couple of years. It's a reintroduction to our staff, see the faces, who's changed, so on and so forth. So I'll wait for folks to find it.
It's the gray.
The gray one. The gray one. And that one.
Yes.
So-
And right here, we even have photographs.
As photographs, I'll skip right to that. So you see right there that we do indeed have a vacancy, and Adam Wood is our new web developer. So he joined us, oh goodness, I want to say November. I think it's November, early November. He's been a phenomenal asset to us since his hire. You probably have already seen some of his work in your email, which is the new messaging system the Sergeant at Arms office has been using to take messages and deliver them to you, regardless of where you are. We have a lot of familiar faces still. I'm sure most people are familiar with Shadi, Delia, Tony at this point, and then of course you
Thank
guys
goodness
are.
they're still there.
Yes, so we've been really fortunate over the last handful of years to retain our staff throughout the pandemic. As we entered the pandemic, 50% of our staff was brand new within 6 months. So it was quite the challenge to navigate. It's been a good experience since then. Moving on, I think it's page 6, just introduction to our.
Well, let me ask
mission.
Kevin, in terms of recruitment, I don't know timing wise, had Arlene come on board? I know that certainly getting committee assistants hired, we heard how much easier it was this year, and we actually had a full complement of individuals, which we struggled with, and it was thanks to having that additional resource. I wondered, did you have some of your positions that you are relying on that?
So the current vacancy and Adam's position, our web developer position, both are going through human resources. I can't say enough about the level of support they provided us throughout that process. It really took a load off of our office.
Otherwise, you'd be doing it, really.
Precisely, yes. And we used to handle all of that in-house, and it was quite the task when you have hundreds of applicants that you have to filter through, the vast majority of which aren't necessarily qualified for the position. So they did a ton of work for us and guided us through the process. It was a very good experience, and we look forward to continuing that.
I was wondering that in terms of the timing, whether when you were talking about half being new, whether you had at least some of the.
Just the last 2 positions at this point. So the web developer and our current vacancy. It's really a challenging environment right now to hire qualified IT professionals. As you can imagine, there's a very large market for them at the moment, given the last couple of years. And some of the challenges we found, believe it or not, are an aversion to showing up to an office. An aversion to wearing a suit or a shirt and tie.
I understand that. I was tortured this week. Oh my gosh, look at those clothes and you say, oh goodness.
Incredibly easy for competent IT professionals to find positions where they can work remotely and they can work at home. And that telecommute is a huge benefit for a lot of folks. And to find somebody that straddles that line of being able to be in person, provide high level of customer service, remain professional, and also be very technical. It's a unique
Oh, yeah.
challenge.
It's a lot cheaper to keep your old well-trained workers is to hire new ones.
It is, it's a incredible value, again, to retain staff than it is to find new staff. We have an experience, oh goodness, over the last 6-7 years, is on average about 18 months of ramp up time for somebody to be fully integrated into our organization, regardless of position. So even our lower level positions, it takes a good.
I'm glad to know that you're highly rated, 98%. I mean, this is better than any political vote.
It's, you know,
Unless you're unopposed.
we have
We surveyed his own staff.
So I can audit it if you would like, Senator Starr, provide the feedback. So I'll skip right to that. The performance measures are something that we do integrate into our presentations now. And this is our customer client feedback survey that is automatic and anonymous. Kicks out to anybody who's ever submitted a help desk request to us, or if we've submitted it on your behalf, you'll see that in your email.
So nobody was dissatisfied.
I have yet to see a dissatisfied, and
You were?
they have reported it. How about that? But we've had great feedback. Let's see, this year we have, as far as when I pulled the information,
So the house, did they get their new sound system?
not quite yet.
Oh.
Our contractors ran into all the supply chain challenges that everybody's experienced. We have manufacturing delays over, I believe, 9, 10, 11, somewhere in that range, different manufacturers. And so the IT staff, through innovation and sheer will, figured out an alternative solution for both the Senate chamber and the House chamber to bridge that gap up until these permanent solutions will be installed post-session. So it allowed for some breathing room there. I will point out that our timeliness performance measures actually did go down over last year, but they're up from pre-pandemic timeframe. So one of the things I talked about last year is how us being remote actually was a force multiplier for our staff. We were able to be in multiple places at one point and didn't have to physically travel from place to place. We were back to physically traveling from place to place since last July. And really interacting with folks. So the timeliness is suffering compared to last year, but it is up from FY21. Let me have the number there.
Well, let me ask, what is the metric for timeliness? Within 30 seconds?
Well, you know, we
I
pride ourselves on being pretty quick.
know the other day you came and I don't think it was like more than 2 minutes before you appeared. In other words, some people have a very, very different sense of what is timely, and some of that isn't. The next question is that even reasonable? So you're not evaluating is it reasonable, but
We're not evaluating that. This is customer client perception, if you will, and
it's not as though you're saying, you know, take a Valium and I'll be down.
The biggest thing that we notice about timeliness when we're reaching out to our clients is, you know, in the legislative environment, minutes and seconds, moments feel like hours depending on the situation.
Right.
So if there's an issue on the floor, if there's, you know, a legislator having a reporting issue, if there's a technology issue.
That I can see.
And all of those really compound quite quickly or if we're a barrier, the technology is a barrier to the committee process. That's something we pride ourselves on not being as a barrier. So we have high expectations for our staff, incredibly high expectations on response time, aside from our clients' perspective.
Well, I'm just thinking that there are some people whose proficiency, certainly mine would be right there, is limited. And so that, you know, the level of support people may need or expect is quite variable as well.
It's a very wide range of support requirements. We have some very highly competent technology professionals in their own rights throughout the legislature. And so we try to keep up and help them where we can, and make sure we meet people where they are.
Right. Well, that's good. You got such high ratings.
You ought to go to work for Comcast or some of them and teach them how to do that.
They are pretty notorious for poor customer service. It's a wide-ranging poor performance on Comcast services. So I could appreciate that as a customer of theirs. I'm going to jump right down to page 13. It's the FY22 achievements. It's a brief overview of that. And it starts with committee rooms and chambers. So obviously we're fairly aware of what that looks like at this point. I believe right there somewhere. Yes, that first one right there. And so it's talking about what we achieved over the last year, just to highlight the pieces and parts. And we outfitted every single committee room and some former meeting rooms as new committee rooms. And then adjacent buildings we've tried to take care of and fit up as needs change. And then the chambers themselves, as I touched on it a moment ago, our contractors were unable to come through due to no fault of their own. Through the manufacturing and supply chain delays. And so that project, while delayed, we still expect to come to fruition in early summer this year, fully ready for next year. But we're very eagerly awaiting the new sound system, not just for the House, but also the Senate. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Just to interrupt, this is one area where we're still holding on to some of the federal money,
Yes.
so that once this project is completed, we can hopefully use that.
And we pushed out somewhere in the neighborhood of 75% of those funds so far, if
Yes.
I remember correctly. So based on the contract, we're still holding 25%, and that will be paid out after we have completed the project.
Nice.
We've worked with Legislature Council, JFO throughout the entire piece. So we've worked with all offices really throughout the entire process. The collaboration that we've had from all offices has been astounding in order for us to all collectively be successful.
Yeah, it's made to work.
Dan touched on, I'm going to skip down to the notable cost drivers. So that's
Yeah,
2 pages.
Too bad. Zoom, so after we come back in person, then we will still have the Zoom software if.
So it depends on policy decisions of the General Assembly, of course. Right now, our understanding of all the policies is that generally speaking at the committee level, if we're not live streaming, we're not legislating. And we do use the Zoom platform in order to make it easy for our committee assistants to live stream as easy as possible. And believe it or not, it's used quite heavily on an individual legislator basis still. I could say Microsoft Teams is not well regarded throughout most of our building as far as ease of use, and Zoom has a low barrier.
Oh, it's much easier to use.
The Teams,
Yes.
yeah, the administration does Teams, half the time I can't get in and I have to call.
Do it on my phone.
Or I get a message, I gotta buy the
Teams
software.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which I'm not about to buy to load onto state, owned
Yeah,
iPad.
trash.
Oh my gosh, I haven't gotten my iPad.
I have somebody standing by with an iPad waiting for you to be ready. As soon as you're ready, we'll make sure we meet that need for you.
Oh
I
my
got
God,
a
it's like giving up an old friend. Oh, I know, I can buy it for 60
Do
bucks.
we have any way to measure, the real value of doing Zoom? I don't think for us, it's for people, constituents. Do we have any way of measuring how many constituents?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Chrissy can go on now and tell how many people are listening.
It's
And
all-
so-
so that's really small.
Yeah, because it's amazing and the number of times people will then email or whatever, we heard you. So the ability to observe the legislative process is so different now. And when you think about, as we've talked about, you've got to hike from Newport or Bennington to come here and sit in a committee room, can take a whole day.
Yeah,
And
this is.
so it really has opened up.
I can have some statistics.
I think for staff, it's a real benefit because often, at least for JFO, we get called into a fiscal note where we've missed the entire testimony in the bill. We can go back and watch it now, and it's amazing for helping us do
Like,
analysis.
in a day or an hour?
I have
or-
cumulative at the moment, since we started streaming. I can provide you with that.
Yes, I'm sure it's quite a large number.
So we have in the neighborhood of just shy of 8,300 videos online. We have recorded 552,750 views. And we have just shy of 9,600 hours of content.
Hours of Contact.
contact between all committees and chambers.
So it's being used.
It's very heavily being used.
Yeah,
I don't have subscriber numbers in front of me, but I believe the Senate chamber actually is the highest subscribed chamber and channel that we have at this point.
well, that stands to
No,
reason.
we are small, but we are mighty. Okay, well, I could, let
So,
us get.
and I can
Watch that Zoom.
We can certainly break down data if you'd like at any point. I believe Mike Ferrant has a lot of statistics that he can break down for a committee by committee basis that we've helped him generate. But it's really hats off to the committee assistants who've absorbed this new role as a meeting moderator and a live stream operator along with their administrative duties. It's quite impressive to see how well it's worked out.
And they're strict, which is good.
Yes.
Well, you have to be.
You have to be. It's like, never did anything done.
Dan touched on the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. I'll touch on that real quick. Happy to answer questions. It's a 3-year agreement. It came up last year to be renewed, so we're in that first year already. We had budgeted 15% as a renegotiation, and it was immediately consumed. And we had a need to expand some services, but not as much as what the price increase was, in order to meet our new security footprint throughout the state. And so we increased some security services there. The net increase was a 42% increase year over year, which is a massive percentage, or not year over year, contract over contract. And it's $42,000. So it's small money in the grand budget scheme of things, but it's a big delta. It's a big delta, and we certainly don't want to hide it by any means. We want to point that out. We pride ourselves in tight budgeting, and we missed on that one. It's unfortunate, but we did wind up landing in our negotiation and locking that price in before they went through yet another price increase. One of the things we typically try to do is we build in about 3 to 5%, depending on historical values of contracts and professional services that we contract out for. This year, we're starting to see most of them come in somewhere 5 to 7%, and some of them even much higher than that, such as Microsoft Enterprise. And then telephone billing. So telephone billing is another area. We're looking for a little bit of an increase. It's a total of $6,000 annually. And that's just to meet the need and the cost changes that have been back billed to us from a purchase service through agency digital services. And breezing through all of that, I'm more than happy to answer questions if you would like.
I don't see it. We've been kind of asking them as we've gone along. We still have a couple more people. Mike Veron is there. And then we have Arlene here. And I don't know for the committee. I don't know if have you all met Arlene?
No.
No. So why don't you come on up, Arlene, and get introduced.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And Arlene has, looks like this in your pile.
So I think you've kind of heard from conversation, we're very fortunate. Based on a recommendation from NCSL, the need to have a human resource professional available to help us deal with personnel issues, get policies, address complicated situations, how we recruit, job descriptions. I mean, the list is on and on because there hasn't been a position like this ever. And so we're very pleased to have Arlene join our staff. And so I'm going to let you go around, and if you'll introduce yourself, Arlene, and then the other members of the committee can introduce themselves.
That'd be great. So I'm Arlene Donovan. Nice to be here this afternoon with all of you. Thank you, and I appreciate your support, Senator Fiscal. I'm the Human Resources Director for the General Assembly. I started in April, so almost a year. It's gone by very, very quickly. But I'd love to have you all introduce yourselves as well.
Yeah, I'm Bobby Starr, as Senator from Essex in Orleans County. Way up north.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Phil Baruth, representing Chittenden County.
Well, we've met, because I'm on joint, one of my appointments is the Joint Legislative Management Oversight Committee. So,
Alice Ditka from Windsor County.
Nice to meet you.
Are you from the state or do you know the county? We're telling you all these counties.
Yes, I
where
know the
they are.
counties. I actually live in Waterford, lower Waterford, so I'm all the way down by, the New Hampshire line. There.
Yeah.
James' neighbor.
Yes, yeah,
White Village area.
yep, that's right in that little white village.
Big city of Waterford.
It's very large. Yeah,
Oh, that's a nice.
yeah.
So you provided this, and I think this is helpful. I'm gonna see if we can get through this because I think Mike Braun is waiting. Or do we have other people? Catherine is all, I think, pretty well set because Dan has done the presentation for joint fiscal. So we'll let you go through your slides.
Yeah. So I can go through them very quickly. They're just two. So the left side of this first page, the human resources cycle, really just outlines what a human resources office actually is responsible for. So it's everything from recruiting all the way through when someone separates from their employment, everything in between. So benefits.
Right through the termination.
Right through termination, employee relations. Hopefully it's a long process.
1 week.
Hopefully not. We're trying to avoid that at all costs. And Dan mentioned that second person. So that second person is listed also on this page. Her name is Eliza Giroux, and she joined us in July over the summer. And she's been instrumental in helping us implement everything that we've been putting in place and making sure that everything is administered properly. And if you want to just turn quickly to your second page, the left side of that page is everything that we've been working on or have completed since I started in April. So we are working with NCSL on a compensation study for the staff. We did implement a rather large uniform recruitment process that Senator Kitchell was referencing when she was speaking with Kevin. We did that across the branch and that was successful. We hired about 28 people in that process, so we'll continue with that going forward. We've created some policies and forms for the staff across the branch and implemented those. We worked with IT on an electronic site where all the staff can go and get everything that they need for human resources. We've also worked really hard at formalizing that UVM program. We have a lot of UVM students here working with us this session. And so I and others, other directors, hope to formalize the process for them. And of course, the longer HR is in place, the more the staff know we're here and they feel more comfortable coming to us. So we are dealing with a number of human resources, pretty common matters. So we answer a lot of questions. And then on the right side of the column are things that we are looking to implement in the coming months. So looking at enhancing some trainings or implementing some new trainings, the sexual harassment prevention training is the top priority in that list. We're looking at that and maybe enhancing some employee orientation. Going to continue our work on that compensation structure that's actively in progress. We will always be looking at policies to implement. We'll continue with the recruiting activities, as I mentioned. And we will probably be looking at the performance management arena as well. That's like uniform performance evaluations across the offices. And it's not uncommon to need some consulting services with an HR department, like perhaps for that sexual harassment prevention facilitation, maybe some workforce development. We're still looking into that. We're just at the very stages of those things. But our goal is to build some consistency across the branch offices and be there to help service everyone, both staff and legislators. So it's a very high level overview. Questions at all?
Thank you.
How many folks, how many employees do we have that are under this?
So we have, in addition to the legislators, we have about, give or take, about 105 staff members.
Pretty good crew.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Oh, that's very good.
we tend to forget and collectively how
Yeah.
much staff there is. And,
Well, I haven't seen each other for 2 years. It's pretty hard to count.
I know, well, Senator Mazza handed me the biographical book for 2010, and I looked at it, oh my God, we all changed since 2010. Oh,
They just say, oh, look at that person. Well, they don't look like that. They have glasses and they have no hair. You know, they have these little notes in their books sometimes describing so that they'll know who's who.
Yeah.
You know, looks like synthesizer. They both look alike. You know, they're trying to figure out who the heck is who.
Mike, do you have any comments you want to make at this point?
No, I didn't have anything to present to the committee. I was just here in case anyone had any questions during Dan's budget presentation.
Thank you, thank you. Appreciate everybody's coming in and on a Friday afternoon, and also the work you do to make everything work around here.
Yeah.
Mike, sometime I gotta come in. I haven't done an expense account since last summer.
Oh, boy, you're in trouble.
Better come on down sometime.
Huh?
Better come on down sometime. We don't want
I
you to
need a
get backed up on this.
tutorial. I
You
need
won't have,
help.
you won't have to pay taxes.
I do have to pay taxes on everything.
Well, if you don't get the money.
Oh, if I don't get the money, yeah, right. Oh, thank you for that logic now.
Well, you could write it off as a legitimate gift.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
For the state of Vermont.
Yeah, right, I'm sure. All right, thank you,
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you, folks.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, committee.
Thank you, Representative.
Have a great weekend. Stay home and watch the snowfall, right?
Good to see you again,
Yeah.
Kevin.
All right, so now we have the parent health center bill.
S91 amendment.
And I don't know whether we want to wait for Richie.
Yeah.
I vote we wait till Richie.
Let's wait for Richie. He can tell us a little bit about it. What's good and bad.
Well,
Let's wait for him.
we had put it on the agenda, but we can always, it's 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon.
Oh, is that all it is?
And I think the reason that we have it is because there's an appropriation that is reflective of the requested amounts that we got in our public hearing of some one-time as well as an increase in the base. And the other was, in the original bill was, which we've gotten from a number of providers, and that was kind of language around an assurance of an annual increase, which we don't put in because all we would do is notwithstand it.
Right.
And then they had a provision that there would be an inflationary calculation for that particular, for parent-child centers. And we do have a communication from the agency saying that they have contracts with many, many entities, and to do this for one, not for the others, really thank you. Oh, is that my level of service? Giving me, huh?
No, that's just in case I missed you and you need.
It's actually extremely easy with that.
Oh, even I can do it, I think is what my committee's telling me.
But I'm here in case you need it.
All right, thank you.
I think even Senator McCarthy can do it all. I'm sure.
Smith helped, he's on the task force. He helped us all summer, he's co-chair of the thing. He never put a bill in for any.
You didn't?
No.
So I'm just saying,
Yes.
we would amend the bill because we're not doing appropriations in any bills at this
Yeah.
point, because we're going to be considering it within the context of all the requests that are out there, of which there are many. And then the other was not creating an inflation calculation with one provider, because if you really say it's justified for one, or to tell you how much that appropriation fee increase, which it might be or not be, it's hard to say one versus hundreds, and so the agency has requested that would be to have that requirement and do that for a single provider was a precedent that they did not support, and nor could you justify selecting one out and not the rest. So we've, in light of that, it would, and that's consistent with our policy around, because we've had other bills where providers have wanted to have statutory language that would say that there would be an annual inflation adjustment. And we said, no, that is not a practice. That's something we just have to do through, the regular budget process. So we'll have an amendment to do those two things for the committee to consider, and then we can, and the agency had no other comments about at this point. So I think we can move it out quite quickly since we've got the amendment
So we
for the
just
committee's consideration.
do that
We
Tuesday.
can do that Tuesday. So I think at this point then, we will, and if you would text Senator Hardy and just let her know that we're not going to take up S91 this afternoon, we'll.
Take it up Tuesday.
Tuesday.
You bet.
Okay. So with